just like we did on the first cup, we're going to be beveling the edges. Again, I cut there and then I flip the slab. This is my rectangle right here. These are where my darts are going to be coming in. I'm going to cut away this material and then add a foot. So after I've beveled, one trick that I like to do is place some type of mark where my darts are going to go. So I'm just taking my ruler and I just made a little indentation. And what I'm looking at right now with that indentation is where that pot is going to angle in. And so I'm kind of looking at this rectangle and dividing it up, dividing the space up in my head and trying to decide where will that round in. So I'm just going to try it. So again, I take my roller and I like to get as much finished while it's flat as I can. So I'm going to just soften that edge over, soften that edge. And what I'm looking to do, again, is to just line those up. This clay is so wet that I'm going to be able to just use water and not score. Anytime I can get away with not having to use a scoring tool, I go for it, because if you're making 20 pots a day, and that's just time that you don't have to waste doing that. And it's really only because this clay is so wet that I can do that. I'm lining this up, finger tacking this, and then again, taking my roller, my hand is on the inside, and I'm just gently pushing. If I'm going to push really hard, then I'm going to alter that pattern, and that's not what I want to do. So I'm really just tacking those together. You need to decide if you like the seam. So I'm interested in squaring this off, a real gentle square. So I'm basically just looking down at my pot and creating a little bit of a square. So I'm just kind of pushing that into place. For me, it doesn't have to be hard edged. I don't need to measure anything. I'm just eyeballing. And I have a tendency to use my seam as a center point. The seam for me becomes the front of the pot. But that is how I set up most of my pieces. So now that I have that square set up, I'm just going to take a little tool and mark where I think generally my four corners are. As you can see, I still have my faint line of where I'm going to be creating my darts. What I'm doing right now is creating a little triangle right there. And I don't do this every time, kind of half and half. You can cut this dart out and then use it as a little template to go around your pot. So I'm going to do that this time. So I'm cutting straight. And now, since I had this mark right here, I'm just going to line that up on the corner of my other mark. And I'm just going to go around the pot really loosely and make my four tracings. I think that ruler line that I put in before really helps if you don't trace your darts, because then you know how far down to go. So since I said that the front of the pot is where my seam is, I'm going to bevel the front and the back the same and the sides the same. So I'm just getting rid of that edge. I'm going to do that on the front and now on the back. And when I do it on the sides, I'm going to do the opposites, because I want that front and back to fold over those sides. So now I'm beveling the outside of the sides. And I like to use this really wet clay because of the bends that I'm going to be asking this clay to do. I think that it needs to be really wet so that you don't get any cracking. And this is fine. You can see this slab is really wet, but it can hold itself up. Okay, so I'm going to start folding those sides in, kind of getting this pot in the general area. Sometimes I kind of push in here a little bit just to kind of clean up those edges. It's still very wet, so we're not going to do any scoring. I'm going to wet all of these beveled edges. And I'll just be overlapping. And I'm just kind of finger tacking at this point, just kind of getting that in place. And you can see why the clay needs to be so wet. You don't want to have any, you don't want to be forcing this. I've got it finger tacked. I'm going to take my roller again. So the roller enables me to keep those seams, but also make sure that those bevels are connected well and they're not going to come undone. So I'm pressing pretty hard against my finger here. So I'm just kind of cleaning this up, getting it somewhat in a square shape. And I'm not ready to turn this over yet because this is so soft. So I'm gonna let this dry in the air and set up to be able to put a foot on it. So we've let this set up really depending on the humidity in the air. I like to get the foot on as soon as I can. So remember I said that the bottoms of all my pieces, I don't make templates for them. The patterns are the cylinder for me. And from there, I trace the actual pot to put it on the bottom. So I have a slab that I've rolled out, compressed it with the rib. And I'm actually just going to put this right on here and trace it. And it's kind of interesting depending on how wide the foot is, the stance of the pot changes a lot. So I would play around with that. So I've done this really crude tracing right here. I'm just gonna cut that out. Not necessarily exactly on those trace lines, but just to give me kind of a soft square. Usually this clay is sticky enough that I can pick that up and I can kind of look at that and does that feel too wide? I think that's fine for the bottom, and then I am going to add a foot. While I have this foot, this bottom off the pot, I'm actually going to do a tracing of it to help me make the foot ring. So I'm going to turn it upside down, and I have that tracing, and do the same thing. I'm going to cut in that valley. And it's nice, since I've come up with this foot ring for this simple cup, I've applied it to other pieces. So I'm gonna eyeball the thickness of that foot that I wanna cut out. You have to find what works for you. All of these techniques I'm giving you are like tools that you can put in your toolbox and incorporate into your own work. I'm gonna soften these edges a little bit. Just get rid of this knifed edge on the inside. And I'm gonna put that right on the piece. Again, just kind of like this liquid slip is perfectly fine. Stick that right on. I like to go and actually kind of smush with my fingers. So I'm getting rid of that knifed edge and also getting that to stick to the piece. And take my roller. I've played around with this where I've had the foot ring a little bit smaller than the bottom of the pot. I've had it larger. It definitely changes the stance and the feeling of the pot. I like this little overlap, and I'm really interested in these two lines here coming together. And I feel like there's a relationship between the line language in this piece.